You are now entering part 2 of the full story, a gentle continuation guiding you deeper into dreams with calm voices of the past. Incense now rang hollow. If they came at all, Zeus watched all of this from Olympus. He had seen mortals at their finest, humble, joyous, curious, and now he saw them drunk on their own strength, stumbling into cruelty with alarming creativity. It was not just the fighting, it was the forgetting. They had forgotten who gave them breath, and Zeus famously did not enjoy being forgotten. He considered thunderbolts, a few well-placed strikes too, remind them of the sky's wrath, but bolts were brief, and the corruption ran deep. This was not a matter of punishment. It was a matter of cleansing. So he called upon his brother Poseidon. Flood them, Zeus said, and Poseidon, always eager to stretch his shoulders and swing a trident, agreed. Poseidon stepped into the ocean, raised his trident, and drove it deep into the seafloor. The earth groaned, waves rose, clouds gathered, heavy, and black rain began to fall, slow at first, like uncertain tears, and then all at once, rivers swelled. Lakes spilt, the sea forgot its borders, hills disappeared beneath churning gray. People ran, climbed, prayed, some to the gods they had ignored for years, others to the sky itself, not knowing who to beg. It did not matter, the water rose all the same, temples collapsed, forests vanished, the cities of men, once loud with pride, fell silent. Statues of marble gods were washed away, leaving only the stones they had been carved from. And above it all, the rain kept falling in the midst of this watery undoing. 2 souls survived, Deucalion and Pyrrha. Deucalion was the son of Prometheus, the Titan who had shaped man from clay and defied Zeus to bring them soft glow. Pyrrha was the daughter of Epimetheus and Pandora, the first woman, she who had once opened a box and released every sorrow upon the world, leaving only hope inside. Together, the two watched the sea swallow the world. But they were not taken. Prometheus, forever one step ahead, had warned his son, and so Deucalion and Pyrrha built a wooden chest, not large, not elegant, but sealed tight. As the water surged, they climbed inside and held on. Days passed, maybe weeks' time, blurred in the endless gray. The world was a sea without horizon, and the sky offered no answers, but the chest floated, bobbing between ruin and rebirth. Eventually, the waters began to recede, the rains weakened, and the sea, tired of its rage, drew back. The chest bumped gently against something solid, stone, ancient, and still. Mount Parnassus. Deucalion stepped out first, barefoot on damp rock. Pyrrha followed, blinking against the pale light around them. Was silence, not the hush of night, but the stunned quiet of a world reborn. They were the only ones left for a long time. Deucalion and Pyrrha said nothing. They wandered the wet stones in silence, stepping over driftwood and fragments of old lives, broken pots, drowned sandals. A child's doll was water-logged and resting in a crevice. The weight of being the only living souls pressed down on them harder than the flood ever had. They were not survivors. They were witnesses. Eventually, they climbed higher up the mountain and built a small soft glow. Smoke rose, curling into the pale sky like a question mark with no sentence to follow. Now what? Pyrrha whispered. It was the right question, not just for them, but for the gods as well. Deucalion and Pyrrha prayed not to Zeus, who had done the flooding, but to Thais, the tightness of divine law and prophecy, older than Olympus, and perhaps more compassionate. They begged her to tell them how to restore the world. The answer came not with thunder, but with stillness. A voice drifted to them in the wind. Cover your heads, walk down the mountain, and cast the bones of your mother behind you. Cryptic as prophecies tend to be. At first, they hesitated. Their mother was long gone, buried beneath waves or time, but Then Deucalion understood Mother was Gaia, the earth, and her bones were stones. So they gathered stones in trembling hands, veiled their heads with wet cloaks, and began to walk one by one. They cast the rocks behind them, and where those stones struck the earth, they softened and shifted. The ones thrown by Deucalion took shape as men, broad-shouldered, sun-darkened. The ones thrown by Pyrrha became women, strong-eyed and quiet, humanity version 2. This new race was not golden. They did not glow, but they were durable, and they remembered. They built cautiously, loved fiercely, and when they told stories around the soft glow, they always began with water. It was not a perfect world, but it was a second chance above them. The gods watched Zeus, satisfied that the rod had been washed away, turned his gaze elsewhere. Poseidon let the sea settle, and Dies perhaps allowed herself the faintest smile. The flood had not just erased, it had planted something challenging, humble, and human. In the end, the world did not roar back to life. It crept. It breathed a blade of grass, a bird's call, the first stubborn flower pushing through silt, and somewhere on Mount Parnassus, two figures held each other beside a dying soft glow, the last and first of their kind. They had not rebuilt a kingdom. They had restarted a heartbeat, but survival, as Deucalion and Pyrrha soon discovered, was only the beginning. The new world they inherited was not gentle. The soil, though rich, was unfamiliar. The winds carried the scent of salt and memory. Every step they took stirred echoes of temples lost, of voices drowned, of laughter once carried by bustling streets now gone. Even the sun seemed quieter, as though it too was grieving. Their first nights were sleepless. Every creak of wind over stone, every splash of a distant stream reminded them of the flood, of the silence it left behind. They lit fires not just for warmth, but to remind themselves that life, flickering and fragile, was still burning. They spoke in low voices, as if afraid to disturb the hush. And when they began to plant, to shape clay, to build crude walls from mud and memory, they did so with reverence, as if the earth might reject them again. If they rushed, the gods did not speak often after that. They had made their point. And perhaps that was for the best. This time, the world would be shaped more by mortal hands than divine ones. Still, the people who rose from the stones carried a kind of wisdom. One passed not through scrolls or speeches, but through the sheer weight of survival. They did not forget easily. When they built altars, they placed them far from their homes. When they told stories, they lingered on the mistakes. They honored hope, but they never trusted it blindly again. And in time, the new world began to sing again different songs, lower, softer, sung by firelight, rather than shouted in temples. Songs of gratitude, songs of warning, songs that told of a time when the sky opened and washed the world clean, not out of cruelty, but because it had no other choice. Not every battle in Greek myth was fought by gods. Some, strangely enough, were left to mortals, men with mortal bones and very mortal fears, handed impossible tasks by those who lived above clouds, and yet they fought. Not for glory, though some claim that not for fame, though that too would come, but often out of necessity, because the gods asked, or a kingdom needed saving, or there wasn't anyone else available. The first of these is Perseus. He was born of prophecy, like so many unfortunate heroes. His mother, Dana, had been locked in a tower by her father after a seer foretold that her son would one day kill him. Zeus, ever the enthusiast for inconvenient romance, visited her in the form of golden rain. Yes, rain. It's best not to ask questions about that. In time, Perseus was born, and his grandfather was not thrilled with either prophecy or divine weather patterns, had mother and son cast into the sea inside. A wooden chest. The chest washed ashore, as they tend to do in these stories, and Perseus grew up among fishermen, strong and kind, and altogether too promising to stay anonymous for long. The trouble came when a local king, enamored with Day, demanded that Perseus bring him the head of Medusa. One of the three Gorgon sisters, Medusa, of course, was no ordinary wandering spirit. Her gaze could turn any man to stone, and her hair was a writhing nest of living snakes. This would be enough to put off most people. Perseus, unfortunately, was not most people. Perseus did not go alone. The gods, ever partial to bold narratives, sent aid. Hermes gave him winged sandals so he might fly. Hades lent him a helmet of invisibility, which feels suspiciously generous for someone known more for brooding than charity. Athena, of course, offered guidance and a polished shield, smooth and reflective like a still pond. And so Perseus flew, unseen, armed with divine tools, into the realm where Medusa slept. He did not look at her. He watched her reflection in the shield, crept forward, and with a single motion severed her head. From her quiet struggle sprang Pegasus, the winged horse, and a giant named Chrysa. It was that kind of story. Heads could be entire ecosystems. Perseus placed the head in the sack, careful not to make eye contact even post-mortem. On his way home, he encountered a princess named Andromeda, chained to a rock as an offering to a sea-wandering spirit. He saved her, of course, slaying the beast and marrying the princess in what must have been an extremely awkward reception. Given the dampness and snake-related luggage, in the end, Perseus returned victorious. He used Medusa's head to turn his enemies to stone, including that same king who had sent him off in the first place. As for the prophecy, it fulfilled itself, as they tend to do. Perseus accidentally struck his grandfather dead during a sporting event, which is precisely why no oracle should ever be allowed near a javelin. If Perseus was the prototype hero, Heracles, better known by his Roman name, Hercules, was the overbuilt sequel. His story begins with rage and repentance after being driven mad by her. Heracles killed his wife and children. To atone, he was given a list. 12 labors, each more impossible than the last. The first task was to slay a Nemean lion, a beast with a hide so tough no blade could pierce it. Heracles, practical as ever, eventually wrestled the creature barehanded, strangling it to peaceful rest and skinning it with its own claws. From then on, he wore the pelt as a cloak, a sort of heroic bathrobe that screamed, "Do not disturb." Next came the Lana Hydra, a serpent with multiple heads that regrew double whenever one was cut. A poor choice for swordplay. Heracles, with the help of his nephew, Alos, discovered the trick. Seared the stumps with soft glow before the heads can regenerate. The battle was long, the smell appalling, but the wandering spirit fell. Then there was the Coranian hind, a golden deer so swift it could outrun arrows. Heracles chased it for a year. Yes, a year, before gently capturing it. This, more than anything, speaks to his endurance, and perhaps his patience with bureaucracy. Other tasks involved a monstrous boar, a flock of man-eating birds, cleaning the Origin stables in a single day, which he did by routing a river and capturing various horrors, including a wild bull, man-eating Mars, and a three-headed dog named Cerberus. Each labor was more than a feat of strength. It was a test of will, cunning, and occasionally negotiation. By the time Heracles completed them all, he had become something more than mortal. Not yet a god, but no longer just a man. His story was full of suffering, but also of endurance. He made mistakes, tremendous ones, but was given a path to redemption. In that way, Heracles became a mirror, not of perfection, but of struggle. And then there was Theseus. His story unlike Heracles' grand arc of redemption, began with a simple identity crisis raised. Away from his father, the king of Athens, Theseus grew up not knowing his true heritage. When he came of age, he lifted a stone, under which lay a sword and sandals, left there by his father as proof of lineage, with a sense of purpose and a suspiciously fast learning curve, he set off for Athens, clearing the road of bandits as he went. It was a mythological resume building, but the real test came with the Minotaur. Every 9 years, Athens was forced to send 7 young men and 7 young women to Crete as tribute, payment for a past ancient silence and a bitter peace. They were fed to the Minotaur, a creature half man, half bull, who lived in a labyrinth so complex even the architect got lost drawing it. Theseus volunteered to go. When he arrived in Crete, he caught the eye of Ariadne, the daughter of King Minos. She gave him 2 things, a sword and a ball of string. The string, more than the blade, was the key. These tied it at the entrance and spooled it behind him as he moved deeper into the maze. When he found the Minotaur, he fought, not with brute force, but with precision. And when the beast fell, Theseus followed the string back into daylight. The wandering spirit was slain. The tribute would end, but the story doesn't stop there. Theseus sailed away with Ariadne, only to abandon her on a deserted island, for reasons the myths gloss over with uncomfortable speed. He returned home triumphant, but forgot to swap his ship's black sails for white, as he had promised his father. Watching from the cliffs, saw the night sky sails and believed his son was dead. In grief, he threw himself into the sea, and so Theseus became king, not by defeating a beast, but by forgetting a promise. What bound these heroes together was not just strength or lineage. It was the simple fact that they tried again and again despite fear, despite failure, despite the gods' habit of moving the goalposts mid-quest. Perseus fought with borrowed tools, Heracles with the weight of guilt on his back. Theseus, for all his cunning, still lost things he didn't mean to. They were not perfect. They were not meant to be. Their greatness came not from being flawless, but from facing the impossible anyway. They did not slay monsters because it was easy. They did it because someone had to, and when their stories were told, it wasn't the victories people remembered most. It was the cost, the loss, the quiet moments after. And that is what makes the old heroes linger, not just in marble or ink or stars, but in the way we still tell their tales, in every story of courage and flaw, in every moment where a person chooses to face what they fear even when they are afraid. Because the monsters were never just monsters. They were fear and grief and guilt, things no sword can truly slay. And yet someone always tries, so sleep now with the knowledge that you don't have to be a god to be brave. You don't have to wear lion skins or hold golden shields. You have to keep walking even through the labyrinth, even when you forget to change the sails, especially then. In the beginning, the gods created man and monsters and storms and envy and soft glow. But long before heroes raised swords or lovers whispered beneath moonlight, there were the Fates, 3 sisters who wove, measured, and cut the threads of every life. Even the gods in their shimmering power could not ignore them. Clo, the youngest, spun each soul into being with fingers as gentle as they were absolute. She twirled the threads of life from a distaff of mystery, her spindle ever turning, ever singing. Lysis, the middle sister, took those threads and measured them. How long? How strong? How entangled? She never smiled, but her eyes gleamed with quiet knowing, and Atropos, the eldest and sternest, held the shears. When she cut the thread, it was final. They did not argue. They did not bargain. Not even Zeus could persuade Atropos to wait. If she snipped, the story ended, and so it was understood fate was not a punishment or reward, but truth woven long before a cradle was rocked or ancient silence was waged. Yet in this world of threads and thunderbolts, love still managed to make a mess of things. One of its most famous casualties was a boy named Narcissus. He was beautiful, so beautiful that entire cities paused to watch him pass. He had the kind of face poets retire over, the kind of hair that made gods consider taking up hobbies. But beauty, untempered, often curdles into arrogance, and Narcissus had no interest in the hearts he broke. He waved them off like dandelion seeds among crossed the wrong goddess, her heir, ever suspicious and rarely wrong, cursed at her to repeat only the last words spoken to her. Echo could no longer. Only her voice remained, haunting valleys and caves, repeating the words of others with no thoughts of her own. Some say she still speaks, waiting for someone to say something worth remembering. But Narcissus would not go unpunished. The goddess Nemesis, vengeance in a flowing gown, saw his cruelty and decided he would learn what it meant to long without answer. She led him to a still pool where he leaned down to drink. There, he saw a face, flawless, tragic, and entirely his. He reached for it, and the reflection rippled. He smiled, thinking of Koi day after day. He returned to the pool, unable to look away. In time, he withered in the place where he had knelt, bloomed a delicate white flower. Among the cliffs, in forest glades, beneath bridges where the world hummed softly, children called out to hear her. Travelers shouted just to feel less. Voices in the air. Narcissus, meanwhile, became more than a boy with good cheekbones and bad manners. His name turned into a warning, a mirror, held to anyone who loved their own reflection a little too much. He was not remembered for his beauty, but for the way it undid him, for how stillness can become a trap, for how long, left unchecked, curls inward. Not all love stories in Greek myth ended in madness or ruin. Some, though strange, carried a kind of wistful magic. Paimon Allen was a sculptor, a quiet man who found people too loud, too flawed, too complicated. So he stopped seeking love in the market stalls and began to carve it from stone. He worked for days, then weeks, then months, shaping his perfect woman from marble, eyes soft but unblinking, lips poised but silent. And when he finished, he was ruined because she was beautiful, too beautiful, and she didn't argue, forget, or look away. Pagan brought her gifts, including flowers, cloth, and even jewels, which he could barely afford. He whispered to her, touched her hand, slept beside the statue, dreaming of warmth. He had not built a muse. He had built a longing Aphrodite who knew the patterns of desire like a familiar melody. Took pity on him one night as he pressed his lips to the cold marble cheek. The stone's softened warmth blossomed beneath his fingers. She blinked. Galasha, he called her, and she looked back. They say they lived quietly, and perhaps they did. For in that small moment, stone to skin, stillness to breath, a wish became a woman, and loneliness found a name. As for Pagan, one might wonder what. Galatia thought of it all, to awaken and find yourself loved before you could speak, to be wished into being with no say in the matter. Perhaps she loved him, or maybe she learned to, or maybe she chose not to. Leave the myths do not say. They rarely ask the statue how it feels. Stories like Pion's weren't meant to teach lessons. They were there to hold something else, some flickering hope that love, even when it seems imagined, might be answered, that even the coldest heart might stir if someone believes in it long enough. And yet, even in these silences, the stories linger. They drift across time, not because they are precise, but because they are familiar. We see ourselves in the ones who chase, and the ones who run, and the ones who wait too long by the water's edge. We recognize the fear of being forgotten and the wish to make something perfect, so we might never be alone again. And so we come to the end, not of myth, for that never truly ends. But of the telling, the gods, the heroes, the curses and quests, they fade for now like torchlight at dawn. But something remains. Greek mythology was never meant to be tidy. It contradicts itself. It bends. It forgets. But that's what makes it so human. These were not just stories about gods. They were mirrors held up to us. They showed what happened when we loved too deeply or too carelessly, when we reached for more than we should, when we defied fate or surrendered to. The gods may have had temples, but it was in the quiet corners, the cave, the hearth, the olive grove, that these stories were truly remembered, whispered to children, painted on pottery, traded by sailors who weren't entirely sure if they'd seen a sea-wandering spirit or just wanted a good excuse for being late. Even now, they persist in the constellations overhead, in words like narcissist and hygiene, in art, in poetry, in how we speak of hope and tragedy. We still long for Pialon, we still echo like the nymph in the woods, and we still wonder what thread the fates are spinning while we sleep. So rest now, traveler of old stories. Let the myths drift and settle. Let their gods climb back to Olympus and their heroes sheathe their blades. There is nothing to slay tonight, only silence and sleep and the slow turning of the stars. If you listen closely, you'll hear the spindle spinning still. Congratulations. You've just woken up in ancient Rome. Not in a palace, not in a marble villa surrounded by fountains and toga-clad servants feeding you grapes. No, you've landed where most people live, where the plumbing is theoretical. The walls are one good fart away from collapse, and your upstairs neighbor is always constantly stomping around like a gladiator on leg day. You're in an insula, the Roman version of an apartment building. Sounds promising, something with a courtyard, a bit of sunlight. Wrong, the Latin word insula literally means island, and that's the first clue that you are absolutely stranded. You're on the 4th floor, if you're lucky. Anything higher than that, and you're basically living in the rafters of a soft glow hazard. These buildings are made of brick, wood, and wishful thinking. They sway in the wind, lean against each other like drunk friends, and have an average structural integrity of a stale loaf of bread. And speaking of bread, don't even think about making toast. Open flames are banned because one bad cooking accident and the whole block goes up like a Saturnalia bonfire. Your room is about the size of a modern walk-in closet. There's a cot term used generously made of rope and straw, and a threadbare blanket that smells like every person who's ever used it before you. The walls are damp, stained, and close enough together that if you lie on your side, you can touch both without moving. You have no windows, light filters in from a crack under the door and from a hole someone accidentally punched through the roof with a broom handle 3 tenants ago. There's no privacy. You share this space with 2 other people, one of whom is coughing with such dramatic flair that you briefly wonder if you're living in a poorly written tragedy. Spoiler: it's not drama. It's probably tuberculosis outside. The morning begins not with birdsong, but with the rumble of wooden carts and the melodious yelling of vendors hawking olives, fish, and something that may have been bred in a former life. A donkey brays like it's dying. Children cry like they're dying. And someone's already arguing over taxes 2 floors below. You stretch. Bad idea. Your back cracks like a papyrus scroll in a drought. You immediately regret trying to act like someone whose spine hasn't been curled into a question mark by years of hard labor and a diet that consists primarily of beans and regret. You're about 27 years old, which makes you one of the older folks in the neighborhood. Most people die before 40, usually from some combination of injury, infection, or inhaling too much, whatever it is that leaks from the latrine pit every summer you shuffle out of bed barefoot. Of course, your barefoot shoes cost money, and if you had money, you wouldn't be living here. The floor is cold and sticky. Is it wine? Is it urine? Is it olive oil? It's all 3. You step around your neighbor's sleeping form and try not to. Kick the communal chamber pot. It's full. It's always full time to relieve yourself. Great. You've got options. Option 1 is the aforementioned chamber pot, which will soon be discarded. Drum roll. Please, right out the window. There's a whole system to it. You're supposed to shout cave before you launch the contents onto the street below, which means watch out in Latin, but let's be honest, nobody does. The roads are strewn with urine, feces, spoiled food, and dead dreams. The gutters are open, the waste flows freely, and if you're lucky, the rain hasn't washed it all back. Toward your front door hygiene, you ask. That's adorable. There are no showers, no soap, no toothpaste. You might wash your face in the public fountain if you're feeling fancy and don't mind sharing your morning splash with 14 other people and a stray dog licking a wound. You scrape your teeth with a stick. Maybe rub some ash on them if you're feeling bougie breath. It smells like a fermented mixture of old lentils and existential dread. Still, you pull on your tunic, your one tunic, and head outside. It's made of rough wool or linen, stained in ways you've long stopped trying to identify. It smells like mildew and human, no deodorant, no underwear. You tie it at the waist with a rope and hope it stays in place. If not, congratulations, you've just invented public indecency. Not that anyone cares, modesty in Rome is mainly reserved for statues and upper-class poetry. Stepping outside is like entering an ancient silent zone of the senses. The street is already packed. Vendors scream. Beggars shout. Oxen defecate mid-step. Flies swarm in thick clouds over the fish stools. Somewhere nearby, a rooster is being murdered, or possibly just expressing itself. Someone's cooking something that smells like disappointment. Your neighbor's child runs past barefoot and covered in something that might be jam. Might be quiet, struggle might be both. You make your way down the street toward the communal bakery, one of the few luxuries that you share with the rest of your block. You hand over your government-issued grain ration, a lump of barley flour wrapped in cloth. The baker takes it, adds it to the others. And hours later, you'll get back a small, hard, blackened loaf. It's barely edible, mostly ash from the public oven's coals. But hey, it's warm. And it's yours, assuming no one steals it first. Breakfast. Sure, let's pretend. If you're lucky, you get a bit of pulse, a thick grill, made from boiled grains. It's what most poor Romans eat every day. Grain water, maybe some chickpeas, maybe not, if you're having a good day. There's a drizzle of olive oil on top. If you're having a bad day, the drizzle is rat urine, and you don't know it yet. Meat is only for the rich milk spoils too fast. Cheese? Maybe eggs? Only if you steal them from a chicken that lives under your stairs. Most protein comes from beans, lentils, and dairy. If you want fruit, it's better to be in season and unspoiled. Otherwise, you're just gnawing on the husk of an overripe fig and pretending it's a plum. You might stop by the latrine, a public latrine, to take care of business. Suppose you enjoy the company of 12 other people doing the exact same thing. In that case, the bench has a series of holes, no dividers, and a shared sponge on a stick dipped in vinegar. That's the Roman version of toilet paper. You rinse it, wipe, and repeat. And you wonder why nobody makes eye contact in these places. After all this, it's barely mid-morning. You haven't even started work yet, but before you leave for your day job, which is physically and emotionally crushing, you pause for a moment and look around. The street is alive, smelly, chaotic, and dangerous, but alive. Kids scream and chase each other. A street performer juggles knives with questionable skill. A merchant shouts about the healing power of fermented fish sauce, and the city breathes, chokes, and burps in one never-ending symphony of humanity. Your landlord has never seen him. Repairs. Don't hold your breath. If your building collapses, it's not considered a tragedy. It's regarded as a Tuesday fires are common, so are floods. So, is sudden unexplained peaceful rest. You're a cog in a system that views you as replaceable. You're not a citizen. You're a warm body in a sense of scroll. Your value is measured in how quietly you suffer. And you will suffer because this is ancient Rome, not the Rome of marble forums and golden laurels, not the Rome of historians and Hollywood. This is the Rome of slums and soot, of crowded insult and chamber pots, of grit and groaning humanity. You're not Cicero, you're not Caesar, you're not even close. You're a peasant on the 4th floor, praying. The 3rd doesn't catch soft glow again, and it's only the beginning of your day. Congratulations, you've survived your first Roman night without being robbed, choked by smoke, or crushed by your neighbor's drunken body rolling onto your sleeping mat. Not bad, but the gods are generous today, and you've earned the privilege of waking up to the sweet, piercing sound of yelling. It's not an alarm clock. It's never an alarm clock. It's your neighbor yelling at his wife, or the vendor below your window screaming about fish, or the chamber pot hitting the cobblestones after someone above you dumped last night's wine and body fluids out the window. Morning in ancient Rome begins not with birdsong, but with complaints, sewage, and regret. Your eyes crack open to a ceiling so low you could punch it sitting up. You're lying on a straw mat shared with your younger sibling, your cousin, possibly a stranger who paid your landlord 2 denarii to squat in the corner overnight. The air smells like feet, garlic, and mildew. You wonder briefly if you died and woke up in Hades. But no, you're still alive. Unfortunately, your home, generously called an insula, is a Roman apartment building made of wood, dreams, and flammable lies. You're on the 3rd floor, which is slightly less deadly than the 5th higher. Up means cheaper rent and a better chance of dying when the whole building inevitably collapses. Down below, the rich enjoy sturdier homes and indoor plumbing. Up here, you enjoy rats, water leaks, and the subtle creaking that reminds you this structure is held together by hope and mold. You swing your legs over the side of your mat and immediately regret it. The floor is damp. It's always damp. Water, wine, quiet struggle, who knows? The answer doesn't change the fact that your only sandals were stolen last week, and you've been walking barefoot ever since you gingerly avoid the sticky patch in the corner and stand, stretching your aching back like a cat that's being kicked down a flight of stairs. Time to wash up, you say cute. There is no basin, no sink, no soap. You wipe your face with a damp cloth that may or may not have once cleaned your landlord's armpits. Your version of a morning skincare routine involves rubbing oil on your skin and then scraping it off with a curved blade called a stridle, which sounds elegant until you realize it's just ancient Roman exfoliation by pain. You're basically buttering yourself, like toast, and then peeling it off. If you're lucky enough to live near a bathhouse and have a few coins left, you can get cleaner later. But right now, hygiene is a luxury. You settle for smearing your face with whatever water you find in the communal jar and call it refreshed. Now comes breakfast. Brace yourself. The Roman equivalent of a power breakfast is nothing. The morning meal is called intentaculum, which is Latin for don't get your hopes up. That usually consists of yesterday's bread, hard as marble, and lovingly stored in a mouse-infested clay pot overnight. You soften it by dipping it in watered-down wine, a drink that tastes like vinegar with trust issues. If you're feeling fancy, maybe you get some olives or a smear of garum, the famous Roman fermented fish sauce that smells like low tide and failure. It's Rome's favorite condiment, used on everything from meat to vegetables to moments of crushing despair. It's the ketchup of the ancient world, if ketchup were made from rotting mackerel. There's no coffee, no eggs, no fruit smoothie with collagen powder. Your breakfast has one job: prevent immediate, peaceful rest. It succeeds barely. You chew in silence while your neighbors scream about something, probably taxes or bread rations. or it's that guy on the second floor who keeps sacrificing pigeons in the hallway. You don't ask. The rule of thumb in Roman tenement life is this: the less you know, the longer you live. Once you've gnawed your way through a slice of disappointment and sipped your wine-flavored sadness, it's time to dress for the day. Don't get excited. You have two garments, a tunic made from rough wool and a threadbare cloak that's more whole than fabric. The tunic itches. The cloak stinks. And both have been repaired so many times, they're basically held together with prayers and the dreams of better fabric. Underwear hilarious you tie. A belt around your waist to keep everything vaguely attached and hope no one notices. Your left shoulder is constantly exposed because the fabric keeps sliding off. The rich wear toggers. You don't. Togas are for citizens, people of high status. You're a pleb, a non-citizen if you're an immigrant, a nobody if we're being honest. If you wear a toga, you are either delusional or planning to be arrested for impersonating someone with dignity. As you step outside, you're hit with the full sensory assault that is a Roman street. The noise is immediate. Vendors hawking their wares street. Musicians playing instruments no one asked for, philosophers debating loudly. And someone somewhere is always screaming about cucumbers. It's gentle stillness, organized, smelly gentle stillness. The streets themselves, paved with stones and slick with everything animal waste. Human waste. Mystery slop that no one wants to identify. Rome has sewers. Yes, but they serve the affluent neighborhoods. Your street is self-cleaning, by which we mean rain occasionally washes the filth into someone else's neighborhood. It's a system. You walk carefully, avoiding puddles and people as you go. A car barrels past you, pulled by donkeys and driven by a man who seems genuinely angry that pedestrians exist. There are no sidewalks. There are no traffic laws. There is only instinct, prayer, and the faint hope that the gods are paying attention. You pass temples where people line up to offer sacrifices, flowers, coins, small animals, or the occasional desperate plea. You don't have anything to give, so you nod awkwardly at Jupiter's statue and keep moving. He probably wasn't listening anyway, if you're headed to work, and most likely you are. Congratulations, that means you didn't starve to peaceful rest yesterday. Work in ancient Rome is not fulfilling. It is not purpose-driven. It is survival in a tunic. You might be a laborer hauling bricks or mixing mortar for one of the emperor's new vanity projects, or you're a porter carrying goods up and down stairs in a building with no structural integrity. You might be a street cleaner, a fish seller, a potter, or worse, a public latrine attendant, paid in pity and bronze coins to sweep filth off marble and pretend your soul isn't slowly escaping through your nostrils. The hours are long. The pay is miserable, and your boss might beat you for fun if you're a slave. You don't even get paid. You work, and if you complain, you're whipped. If you collapse, you're replaced. If you die, well, someone else gets your blanket. Midday approaches, and the sun is brutal. Rome's climate is hot, sticky, and utterly unbothered by your suffering. There's no air conditioning, no shade, unless you cling to a building shadow like a sweaty ghost. Your tunic sticks to your skin. Your sandals, if you have them, slap against the stones with every exhausted step. And if you don't, your feet are slowly becoming part of the pavement. Lunch, huh? It's called Panium, and if you're lucky, it's more bread. Maybe a bit of cheese. Maybe dried fruit or a boiled egg if your employer had a good gambling night. You eat sitting on a step, watching more affluent Romans being carried around in litters like mobile royalty. You chew, and you try not to think about how you're probably consuming sand and rodent hair. As the day wears on, the smells intensify. The streets are weak with sweat, garbage, and garum. You pass a bakery and inhale deeply. The scent of fresh bread temporarily tricks your brain into thinking life is worth it. Then you remember bread is taxed, and your landlord raised rent again, and your water jar cracked last night. Your cousin is still sick with whatever plague is currently fashionable. You keep walking, you keep surviving, because in ancient Rome, that's the entire point. And finally, after hours of backbreaking labor, social humiliation, and a mild sunstroke, you make your way home. You ascend the stairs of your insula carefully, because the staircase is made of splintered wood and shame. One misstep and you're joining the spirits of the fifth-floor tenants who fell last week. You reach your door. You enter. It's night sky cramped and smells like boiling cabbage. Even though you don't have any cabbage, someone is already asleep in your corner. You don't ask who they are. You lie down next to them and close your eyes, hoping you don't dream about the bucket. And with that, your Roman morning ends. Was it glorious? Was the number dignified? Absolutely not, but you survived, and in ancient Rome, that holds significance. Tomorrow you get to do it all again. You've survived your first Roman night in the insula. Barely sleep came in waves, interrupted by creaking floorboards above, shouting neighbors, the distant rumble of wagons, and an itching sensation on your leg that you'd rather not investigate. You're hungry now, not the kind of hunger that inspires a brunch outing or a carefully measured protein shake. This is more primal, heavier. Your body wants fuel, but this is ancient Rome, and you're poor. So what you're about to experience isn't breakfast, it's survival. The Romans didn't consider breakfast a significant meal. Not in the way we do. They had a word for it. Itaculum. A small early meal was typically consumed by those who had to work long days. For the rich, it might consist of bread dipped in wine, cheese, olives, or even a bit of fruit. But you're not rich. You're a plebeian, one of thousands crammed into the belly of the city, eking out a life in the shadow of Rome's grandeur. For someone of your station, Iaculum is more of a formality than a feast. Maybe a crust of coarse bread, dry and unevenly baked. This bread is likely a leftover from the day before, or the day before, that made from barley or spelt grain types considered suitable for the lower classes. It's dense, night sky, and has the mouthfeel of something chipped from a wall. There's no butter, no jam, and certainly no eggs or honey. Those are the luxuries of someone with coin and status. What you might have if luck has smiled upon you is a bit of pulse. Pulse is the quintessential Roman peasant food, a porridge made from farro, emma, or barley. It's cooked with water and occasionally seasoned with a drizzle of oil or the faintest hint of herbs. Assuming you have any, it's not pleasant. Exactly, it doesn't nourish so much, as it fills a heavy steaming paste that sits in the stomach like an anchor. On the worst days, it might be prepared with river water or stored rainwater, slightly green and earthy. You devour it. Slowly gives your brain time to realize it tastes like boiled dampness, and yet this is your fuel. Pulls a bit of bread and water. If you're lucky, you've managed to secure some puska, a standard drink among the poor and the military. It's made by mixing vinegar with water, sometimes infused with herbs if available. It sounds unpleasant, and it is, but it's far safer than drinking untreated water straight from a public fountain or system. The acidity of the vinegar kills bacteria and masks the taste of unclean sources. It's sour and sharp, but it does the job. The public fountains of Rome flow constantly, fed by those legendary aqueducts, but that doesn't mean the water's clean. Where you live, Rome's water system was advanced, yes, but only until it reached the labyrinthine lower districts. There, the water quality depended heavily on the maintenance of lead pipes and the cleanliness of the castella, the distribution tanks feeding your block. And maintenance wasn't always a priority in neighborhoods like yours. Suppose someone upstream threw garbage, urine, or animal remains into the drainage channel, or worse, into the water itself. In that case, you'd never know until it was too late. Hunger is a quiet constant for you. Even when you eat, it never really fades. Food is expensive, and most of your earnings go toward rent, taxes, or staying on the good side of your local patronus. So, you ration what little you have. You learn to chew slowly, savoring every bite like it's a luxury. There's no variety. You eat what's available. And more often than not, that means you eat the same thing every day: meat. Rarely the occasional salted fish, usually garum-cured scraps or sardines. So pungent, they could double as weapons. Meat is reserved for the upper classes, for religious festivals, or as part of a soldier's rations, if you do get your hands on some. It isn't perfect organ meat, bones, things the rich don't want. You don't waste a single scrap. As for fruits and vegetables, they appear sporadically. You might find some wilted leeks, onions, or turnips in the marketplace at a discount near closing time. Apples and figs are seasonal, and while Rome's Mediterranean climate makes such things abundant in theory, your wallet tells a different story. You buy what? Others don't split fruit, half-rotten dates, bundles of wilted greens, all wrapped in yesterday's gossip and grime. It's edible technically, you hope. And if you're truly desperate, there's the street food. Rome had an active street food culture, particularly for people experiencing poverty, who didn't have kitchens in their insula. Apartments, the poppy, small taverns, or hot food shops line the alleyways of working-class neighborhoods for a few asses, the copper coins of the realm. You might get a bowl of stewed lentils, seasoned with whatever bones or drippings the cook could find. Perhaps a small skewer of meat, heavily salted and suspiciously chewy, or a honey cake made from stale grain, barely sweet, and baked hard enough to require soaking before eating these places. A busy, smoky, and loud. They smell like hot oil, burned flour, and sweat. The clientele includes laborers, criminals, out-of-work veterans, and the occasional formerly enslaved person. They're not always safe. Fights break out, money disappears. But there, you're only shot at something warm, and you keep coming back. It's important to understand that most Romans didn't cook their own food. The lower classes lacked private kitchens. Soft glow laws made it dangerous to cook in cramped wooden apartments, so communal ovens and publiceries filled the gap. But that also meant you were always dependent on merchants, on bakers, on the shifting prices of olive oil and grain. Speaking of grain, it's the backbone of the Roman diet. The government knows this. That's why they introduced the annona, the grain dole, a state-sponsored distribution of grain to eligible Roman citizens. If you qualify, you receive a monthly allowance enough to make bread or poles for a few weeks. It's not generous, but it's better than nothing. For many, it's the line between hunger and starvation. But access isn't guaranteed. You need to be a registered male in Rome. If you're a woman, a foreigner, or an enslaved person, the annona isn't for you. You find other ways. Food for you is rarely fresh. Bread goes stale quickly. Pools cling to the bottom of pots long after they should have been scrubbed out. What you consume today was cooked yesterday or last week. Spoilage is common. Flies are constant, but waste is unthinkable. You eat around the mold, you scrape off the bad parts. You chew slowly, savoring what little flavor remains, and yet despite all of this, the city never starves. Not wholly. Rome's granaries are full. Its imports steady. Ships from Egypt, Sicily, and North Africa sail in daily, their bellies full of grain, oil, and wine. The empire feeds its capital like a mother feeds a hungry child. You don't always get your share. If you're a slave or a freedman in service, your meals depend on your master's whim. You might get stew, bread, or leftovers from the main table, or you might go hungry until someone remembers you exist. If you're a day laborer, your meal breaks are dictated by your work. Dig ditches, haul stones, build baths, and at mid-morning, you get 10 minutes to eat a piece of dried fig or drink from a shared cup. And let's not forget feast days. Not because you're invited to the banquet, but because it's the one time the rich throw scraps to the streets. Religious festivals sometimes include public offerings, distributions of food or coin, perhaps a roasted pig or a platter of bread and fish. For the masses, it's not kindness, it's politics, but you take what you can get by mid-morning. Your hunger has faded into something else, a pressure, a reminder you've eaten just enough to continue. You tie the cloth belt around your tunic a little tighter and get moving. You've got work ahead of you. Rome doesn't wait. And tomorrow you'll eat again, or you won't. But either way, you'll wake up in the same insula with the same cracked bowl and the same stale loaf waiting on a wooden shelf. Because in ancient Rome, food is never far away. But neither is hunger. The sun has fully risen now, and the Roman day is underway for you, a plebeian or perhaps an enslaved person. That doesn't mean a slow stretch and a relaxing breakfast. It means the work begins, and it begins early. Rome is not a place of idleness for the lower classes. The empire may be vast, but the streets of the city feel like a funnel where the sweat of thousands filters upward to benefit the few. Let's start with the plebeians, not the poorest of the poor, but far from comfort. Most plebeians in the city work trades, manual laborers, builders, bakers, water carriers, cobblers, and street sellers. If you're skilled, maybe you're a stone cutter, or you've secured a spot in one of the Roman guilds, the collegia. But for most, you're expendable muscle hired for the day, paid by the hour if you're lucky. You don't have a fixed schedule. You have a need, a relentless knowing one. You work because not working means not eating. You wake before dawn, grab what counts for breakfast, maybe a crust of bread or a spoonful of barley mush, and head out to find work. The Forum is one place you might go, not to debate philosophy, but to stand around and hope someone needs a laborer. You're competing with hundreds of others. Some are stronger, some have tools. You don't. You're hired to carry bricks across a construction site. Rome is constantly being built. Roads, aqueducts, arches, homes for the rich. It is said Augustus found Rome a city of brick and left it a city of marble. You'll be the one dragging that marble, sweating and silent. The work is brutal. There are no labor laws, no unions, no breaks, no helmets, no complaints. If you fall off a scaffold, you're not given aid. You're given a nod and a shove to the side so the next man can take your place. You don't ask questions. You don't slow down. The overseer watches with a stick in hand, and he doesn't carry it for decoration. If you're not lucky enough to find a builder's job, you may end up in the tanneries. The smell hits you long before you reach the vats. Animal skins were soaked in urine and dung to soften them, and then fermented in the sun. You'll spend your day kneeling in a mixture that would make a modern sewage worker gag. Gloves don't exist. You stir with your bare hands. The stench clings to you long after you leave, and worse, it becomes normal. Still, you persist because if you don't earn a few copper coins today, you won't be eating tomorrow. Your rent on that insula apartment, your crumbling, rat-ridden soft glow trap, is due every few days. Miss a payment, and you're out. No notice, no mercy. The landlord has 5 men waiting to take your place, but perhaps you're not a plebeian. Maybe you're a slave. Life is somehow more complicated still, because now you don't even get the satisfaction of wages. Your body is labor, and your labor belongs to someone else. You might be a household slave owned by a moderately wealthy Roman citizen. If so, your work starts before sunrise. You're fetching water, cleaning floors, preparing meals you'll never taste. Maybe you're young and educated, assigned to read to the children or read aloud to your master. It sounds better. It isn't one mistake, and you're beaten. If the master's wife is displeased, you're sold. There are no protections, no court to hear your case. You are property like the stove or the sandals, or you're a field slave outside the city, toiling in the vast latifundia, those enormous agricultural estates that feed Rome's grain-hungry stomach. Here, there are no roofs, no days off. You wake with the sun and bend until it sets. You plant, plow, harvest, and sweat, no matter how hot, how cold, how sick you feel. You work. The overseer doesn't care if you collapse. There are chains for those who slow down, for those who run. There are whips, and for those who rebel, there's crucifixion, a public one, along the roads where others can see. Some enslaved people are trained for skilled labor, stone carving, pottery, and weaving, but that doesn't make the whip any less real. It just means your quiet struggle stains a different kind of floor. And what of the women? If you are a woman, enslaved person, or free, you labor too, not on the scaffold or in the forum, but in quieter ways that bleed just as much. You're grinding grain with a heavy stone handmill. Your arms are aching as you turn the wheel hour after hour. You make bread, wash clothes, fetch water, tend fires, clean, mend, and weave. If you're poor, you might also sell small goods in the street or offer your services as a wet nurse or a midwife. In desperate cases, you might sell yourself. Prostitution is legal in Rome. Taxed, even it is not a profession. Of glamour, it is survival. There are no toilets in your insula, no kitchens, so you make do in the alleyways or public spaces. Fires are frequent. The stairs collapse. Your children are not safe. Not from hunger, not from illness, not from the building itself. Life expectancy is low. Infant mortality is high. Your child's best chance is to survive to 5 ahead. There are no toilets in your insula, no kitchens. So, you make do in the alleyways or public spaces. Fires are frequent. The stairs collapse. Your children are not safe. Not from hunger, not from illness, not from the building itself. Life expectancy is low. Infant mortality is high. Your child's best chance of survival is to reach 5 after that. It's still a coin toss, and yet Rome moves on. The senators debate, the aristocrats drink wine on shaded terraces. Their banquets are filled with stuffed dormice and honeyed dates below them. Unseen, you sweat, bleed, and endure. Your work is invisible, but indispensable. The aqueducts flow, the grain. Ships arrive. The streets are swept because of people like you. Sometimes the monotony is broken, not for a festival or a feast, but for something worse. A soft glow, a collapse. A riot Rome is a tinderbox of labor and inequality. The gap between the rich and poor isn't just wide, it's weaponized. If a soft glow starts in your insula, the ladders don't reach the top. There are no soft glow escapes. You carry your children, your pots, your life on your back and hope the flames stop before your floor is reached. Or maybe you're caught in a food riot. The grain doll is late. The bread is moldy. The people are hungry. You crowd the forum, shouting with the others, demanding your portion. The guards arrive, batons, shields, quiet struggle in the streets. You are dispersed, not heard. And then there's disease. Filth lines the alleys. Latrines overflow. The Tiber, your drinking source, is also a sewer. You wash clothes in it. You bathe in it. You drink from it. Parasites. Thrive illness spreads. You know the signs, a fever, the chills, a child coughing in the night. There is no doctor, no apothecary for your kind, only rest, prayers and hope rarely comes, but still you work. Because if you stop, even for a day, the city forgets. You, the empire, forgets you, and hunger remembers you very, very quickly. This is what it means to work in ancient Rome. Not to build wealth or rise in rank or find fulfillment, but to survive, to endure, to hope that your children will have slightly fewer blisters on their hands than you did. It is not glamorous, it is not heroic, it is labor at its most brutal, its most thankless. The empire was not built by emperors. It was built on the backs of men, women, and children who worked until they broke and then were replaced now. As the midday sun climbs overhead, your tasks are only half done. There is still cleaning, cooking, and tending to the hearth, carrying water, hauling, waste. Your stomach growls, your fingers cramp. Your feet blister inside sandals that barely hold together, and no one is coming to relieve you. Not today. Not tomorrow. Welcome to the workday in ancient Rome. You wouldn't last a single one. Congratulations, you've made it past the market. Survived the street toilets and managed not to get mugged for your shoes. If you were even lucky enough to have shoes. But now comes the real challenge. Going home, or more accurately, climbing into the creaking, overcrowded, highly flammable tinderbox that you are expected to call home, your insula. You live in an insula not because you chose it, but because you're poor. And in ancient Rome, poor people didn't have houses. They have layers. Multi-story apartment buildings are packed so tightly that sunlight is more rumor than reality. Your insula is 6, maybe 7 stories tall, illegal technically, but so is half the city, and bribes are as wrong as toas. It's built of wood, clay, and wishful thinking, leaning slightly to one side. As if preparing to collapse out of sheer exhaustion, you climb the stairs slowly, carefully, because elevators haven't been invented yet, and the building sways. When someone sneezes on the 2nd floor, the higher you go, the worse it gets. Wealthier residents tend to reside on the lower floors. Better ventilation, easier access, and the lower probability of dying in a fall. You, on the other hand, are up near the roof where the air is thin. The ceilings are low, and the rats have built a local economy. There are no private rooms, no insulation, and definitely no plumbing. Just a single room shared with your family, your livestock, and any opportunistic creatures that wander in through the cracks. The walls are made of mud brick, and your door doesn't quite close. But hey, you have a curtain luxury. And what about soft glow safety, you ask? Good question. Soft glow is your most constant faithful threat, because every home needs soft glow to cook, to light, to warm. But there's no chimney, no